drink coffee so that I can see the different thumbnails, so I know which video I'm looking at when I download these. Anyway, so this video is about identity. You just listened to me talk about genre, and I think maybe you're already starting to see the through line here. But identity is another one of these things that we experience all the time in our lives. I think it's a pretty intuitive concept. We know what identity means. But I think to be more specific in this specific academic context, we can define identity as a recognizable set of behaviors, attitudes, a bunch of other stuff, and language. So it's all of these things that, like genre, are recognizable to us, to other people, to the world at large, as constituting a set of behaviors that then allows people to predict behaviors, et cetera, attitudes, et cetera, based on that identity. Does that make sense? This is a difficult concept, so let me just highlight, and same with genre, I should have said this more in the last video, but please don't hesitate to ask me questions. If you're having trouble with these concepts, this is a good opportunity to come to my office hours, give me a call, text, whatever. Anyway, so identities in this sense are things that are different than, but also related to, maybe like a psychological identity. The thing that, the word Seth, what does the word Seth signify? My name. It's attached to my body in some ways, like this is who I am. It's attached, maybe you believe in an eternal soul. Maybe my name is attached to that. Weirdly, my name is Seth Meyers, so it's also attached to this other guy. But you know what I mean? Is it this set of psychological, this history that I have? Does it exist in the brain? Whatever. So there's this identity as a unified thing that's unique about me or whatever. And then that interacts with these different kinds of identities, these social identities that I want to focus on here for a second. So these social identities are things like, being a teacher. You can have the identity as a student. You can have the identity as a, I don't know, you're a, what do you call them, a sandwich artist at Subway, maybe. That's an identity. You are a fan of electronic dance music, or you are a football player, or, whatever else. You identify in terms of race and gender and sexuality and sexual orientation and all of those things. Class, you can identify in terms of national identity and ethnicity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the thing to remember is that in different social contexts, different identities are going to rise to the surface and rise to prominence based on, again, just like genre, it's going to be created by and reflected by the context that you're in. So when you're in the classroom, you're a student. I'm a teacher. I'm going to speak and write in certain ways as a teacher. I'm going to dress in certain ways as a teacher, maybe. I do, realizing I need to shave. Anyway, and you're, as a student, you're gonna behave in certain ways. But then you're also a particular kind of student, and so there are layers of identity that are always interacting at any given moment. And then, quite obviously, I think that it's a lot more obvious with identity than with genre. But identity also obviously plays into the social fabric that we all live in, and obviously there's a lot of power associated with different identities. For instance, being a teacher gives me quite a bit of authority over you all as students that doesn't carry over at all into other contexts. You know what I mean? So I don't know, if this summer while you're a student in my class, I run into you at the grocery store, you're probably going to be a little deferential to me, and I'm probably going to be a little more formal with you. If I run into you in the grocery store in 10 years, we'll just be peers. We'll just be two people grocery shopping, and we'll treat each other like that. Um, uh, and then there's obviously this long history of race and sex and class, and the way that those identities interact. I also I don't want to put too fine a point on that, because these contexts also change. So I think very often we think of these like dominant identities as being always dominant. So here I am a cisgender heterosexual white man. Which is the dominant category in our country, in our broad social, milieu. I'm college educated, et cetera, et cetera. Bragging. But there are certain situations where I don't have a lot of power. If I went to that hip hop show in Denver, I don't think people would automatically treat me badly. But being a middle-aged guy is, I wouldn't turn any heads. People would more or less ignore me, and I know that for a fact. Don't ask me how. Anyway, so I do want to think about. I think the important thing to think about here, and this is one of the ways that language, that genre and identity start to interact, is with language. Because all of these identities, we dress differently when we're teachers, students, brothers, sisters, sons, whatever. But the thing I want us to focus on here is that we also talk differently. We write differently. When I write a text message to a student, it's different from writing a text message to a friend. And this is where there is something almost magical, almost very, very mysterious about the ways that we as individuals, as our individual identities, not these kind of larger social identities, but that eternal soul, or the unique accumulation of your particular history and the things that have happened to you, bleed into language in such a way that you can recognize other people's voices even in writing. So I don't know, my friends that I text with the most often, I know what their texts sound like. I know the things. There's a recognizable pattern. It's hard to explicitly outline what that pattern actually is, but I know that when I get a certain when somebody's, I don't know, whatever, some example, some stupid GIF or something, I know who's sending that to me almost before I see the name of the thing. And I think that's really key to the comedy essay. I would encourage you to, if you haven't already, to read the Sarah Vowell piece, Shooting My Dad. I think it's called, I always forget the title. But it's really interesting in this sense because she has to, she's a total stranger to us. You may know her. She voiced the teenage daughter on The Incredibles. She's been on TV and stuff, but she's relatively unknown and basically a stranger to all of us. And yet she builds this sense of identity with her writing. She builds this sense of self that we can start to understand and recognize. And I think it's in that recognition of her particular humanity, that kind of mysterious thing that Sarah Vowell represents, that the words Sarah Vowell represent, comes through, and that we then connect with as an audience. And I think it's that connection that makes this funny. I think, especially in the genre of the comedy essay, you have to build in a sense of who you are, not just in the context of the essay. So you're a student in the essay, or you're a religious acolyte, or you are a dog trainer, whatever it is in the story that you're telling. But there has to also be a sense of who you are. In other words, that you are telling this story in a way that no one else can tell it. And it's hard to pinpoint how exactly to do that, like what words to use, but you know it when you see it. it's really pretty easy to do once you kind of let go of all the different expectations of genre, and then let yourself go in. Again, way easier said than done. So the through line here is really this idea of recognition. So with genre, a genre is a recognizable form that gives something meaning, that gives an audience a place to land, a place from which to judge a text. And then identity is also a recognizable set of behaviors and attitudes and forms and things like that, but attached to a person that also gives an audience or another person a sense of what to expect. Does that make sense? Again, please email me, call me, text me, make appointments for office hours if this isn't making sense. So I think when you think about these two things together, that explains something to me. That explains something about why I love certain comedians so much. You know, you think about, like, I listen to the Conan O'Brien's podcast. I get a sense of who Conan O'Brien is as a person, as a comedian, as a father, in all of these different identities, as a boss, all this stuff. And that gives me a particular perspective that I can identify as Conan O'Brien. And that gives me, like, this really strong, like, warm feeling toward him. Like, I genuinely feel, after listening to this podcast for however many years now, I genuinely feel like Conan O'Brien is my friend. He's not. I'll likely never meet him. He seems like a very nice man. I hope I do get to meet him someday. But you know what I mean? Like, he feels like my friend. And I think, there are a lot of different genres that do this. We can get into Instagram if you want to during office hours. But there's a lot of interesting stuff here. So anyway, that is my lecture about identity. Thanks for listening.